Well, it's 10:02. I think we'll go ahead and get started. I know we're still missing one or two people, but we'll let them join us as soon as they can. So good morning, everybody. Welcome back. We're seeing each other quite often now. I'm going to ask Mike if you can just go ahead and bring up the PowerPoint that we're going to start with this morning. So welcome back, July 9th. Go ahead, Mike. I want to first look at just that return to school planning team. I like to start with this slide just because we may have somebody joining us today that hasn't joined us previously. And this really does show the district task force, those of us that are on panelists today are right there in the middle. And then all of our focus groups are around the outer edges. We have done a lot of discussion, food service and transportation and the health advisement. What we haven't talked about yet really is that curriculum instruction piece down on the very bottom. So I'm just going to share a little bit of information about that area. The other thing that you may notice is when you look around at the 4 priorities on the outer edge, the one on the top left has changed slightly. And in previous versions, and again, just as a reminder, all of these are working documents. This is, until we submit this to the state, we want to keep making these documents better. And it did say to prioritize youngest learners, special education, our EL and unique learners. And some of the feedback that I was given, which was great feedback, was people who have students who are high schoolers were like, well, they're not the youngest learners. Does that mean we're not prioritizing them? And that really was not the intent of this priority at all. It came out of one of the documents from the state, which actually was telling us to be sure to prioritize our youngest learners. And it has, I think, more to do with probably the economy and helping families, because those are that was the age level that was struggling the most when we were on distance learning. But in order to have a better priority and update that, it now says analysis of achievement data to close the gap, accelerate the pathway, and maximize learning gains for all students. Just to be very clear that we're focused on pre-K through 12 plus, every grade level. So I just want to note that, and it's in yellow just to make it easy for you to see. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. So we're
I just wanted to say thank you for bringing that up. I know you and I had a discussion about our high schoolers, so also needing to have a focus. So I appreciate it.
No, you're very welcome, and I think the feedback we're getting from the community is very helpful for us in this planning phase. So thank you. Looking at our instructional work, and this is again, some of you that watch the board meetings that are on the call today or on this meeting today. No, we've talked a lot about this, but some people may not have heard it before, is we are preparing for asynchronous and synchronous instruction. By the end of last year, we had 60 minutes of synchronous, which means we're using a platform like Google Meets. At the end of last year, it was Zoom. We're not planning on using Zoom for the fall. Zoom is still not on the Connecticut data privacy list. There was an emergency where they basically signed a pledge with the state of Connecticut, and they were offering it free for schools, and that's why schools started using it, but it is still not actually, has not gone through the approval process, and we should be using platforms that are approved. And so we will be using Google Meets for that functionality. We are also preparing for a face-to-face and a remote learning option at the same time, and that is required by the state. So, and it's called remote learning in the newest document by the state, and not distance learning. So we're trying to be consistent with the state document. It's almost like we're running 2 schools, and that in itself has its challenges, trying to figure out how we're going to manage that. Preparing for a back to school analysis of learning needs. And I'm not going to go into it today, in that we have a new platform called Link It, but I will say it was shared at the board meeting several board meetings ago, and had a great video presentation that is available. And we will put that presentation on the website here for the return to school planning page, just for those people that want to reference what that tool is. And it is an instructional tool that will allow us to look at what are the standards that were mastered for children in K-8, so that when we come back, we can really personalize the learning for children who may have struggled with the concept during distance learning because it was distance learning instead of face-to-face. So we feel very well equipped in our back to school analysis of our learning needs. Go ahead, Mike, thank you. So I'm going to start out. We've had a survey that launched the last week of distance learning, left it open literally until this morning. I had 2 more people take the survey either late last night or early this morning. So we've allowed them just to kind of dribble in, but we did have 1,566 people respond, which is a very good rate. The first time we did our distance learning survey, which was back in, I want to say, beginning of April, we were about 1,300. So this was a larger response than we even had earlier when we were right in the middle of distance learning. And the reason that we were surveying was really to take a good look at how people felt about distance learning and get some feedback from our families. And basically we asked them if they felt good or great, and you'll see that's been grouped together, because if they're good or great, we're doing a pretty good job from a school standpoint. Then we asked them challenging, but we made it work. We knew distance learning was challenging for so many of our families for a multitude of reasons. Some of it could just be family structure, and some of it was just the way the information was presented, the number of platforms that we have, and then how many families really struggled with distance learning, and it was very difficult. And you'll notice for preschool, as we look at each one of these slides, you'll notice that the green, which is good to great, will grow. And part of that is really attached to the developmental level of the children. And it's much more difficult to have an incredibly strong remote learning program for preschool, just with the nature of how preschool is taught, than of course it is at a high school level. And our goal going into the fall, into September, is to continue to have more green and less of that very difficult section. And the challenging, we would like to, what can we do to make this a better experience for families? So it was challenging, but they made it work. How can we get them to good or great? So this is what preschool looks like. We're now going to look at just K-5. And when you look here, good to great was 35%. So you get a little bit more green. Very difficult drops to 20%, which is the blue. And I will note the color, the blue and the yellow switched on this one slide, and I didn't realize until it was too late. So don't get fooled. Be sure you read the heading on this one. But good to great was 35%. Very difficult is 20%. That's better than it was in preschool. So that's a good, we like that. But what that tells us is we still want to be able to get more of those challenging, but we made it work, that 45% over to the green. So 35% thought it was good or great. Middle school, you'll see again, it grows. A little bit more independence. It's a little easier for middle school students to be able to read their own work, understand what's posted. So again, it climbs to 46% saw it good or great. 25% thought it was very difficult, 29% challenging, but we made it work. But again, it was a little bit easier for our middle school families. And the 46% good to great was actually a little higher than what I thought it may be, just given how difficult this was. And not only for families, for teachers. We know this was difficult for everybody, and especially right in the height of COVID. In making the switch that we did so very quickly to distance learning, and also making sure that we had, a couple hundred families that did not have internet access, that it took us, at least 2 to 3 weeks trying to make sure we could get everybody what they needed. They had a broken Chromebook that they had to bring in exchange. And we went through, during the process, about 400 Chromebooks that needed some sort of work, or something was not working with the Chromebook, where they had to come and exchange those. So felt pretty good about this. Of course, we want to see that blue and the yellow continue to move over to the green. When we look at high school, again, it climbs. 50% of the high schools said it was good or great, and so half of the high school had a good experience. That doesn't mean that everybody loves it. I think if you ask the question, would you want face-to-face or remote learning, you'd get a different answer. There are some families that did really like remote learning, but I think for the most part, we all know there's nothing that really compares to, live instruction with a teacher. And again, that very difficult stays fairly consistent, other than when you're down into pre-K where it's higher, is around 22%. So it's somewhere around a quarter of our families, distance learning was really challenging. And what we heard from some of our families is some of them, it was students who face-to-face was really easy. And especially if they're a student who is really strong auditorily, and they find taking notes auditorily in class, and having class discussions is really the way that they learn best, then remote learning could be a little bit different, because the independent level of remote learning is higher than what it is in a classroom. But again, we want to continue to see more of the green. So some of the adjustments that we are making, and I'll get to that in just a minute, but We are making adjustments in summer school right now. It started this week, and we are running our summer school as distance learning for literacy, numeracy, and then some classes also for high school. And we are doing 50% live, 50% synchronous and asynchronous, and trying to really hone in on some of our platform issues as well. And I think that's going to be very helpful for us in the fall. We're going to continue to watch that over the next few weeks as we continue to make adjustments. We also, on this survey, asked our parents where they could contribute just comments, what went well. And obviously with, 1,500 people responding, I didn't want to just bring up 1,500 comments. So this is a word cloud that we can pull from all the comments. And these are the words that are larger were used the most in some form of context. And, lots of compliments for our teachers. Those people who are, I think, in the green were very appreciative of what their teachers were doing for them and their children, and really recognized, I think, how difficult it was, and had some teachers that were really connecting with kids and figured out that distance learning piece, because it was hard. So, that's something that went well, was our teachers. Also, I circled on the top, I circled a couple of these in yellow just to make it easy, because I've read all the comments. Flexibility. You'll find that there are families who love the flexibility that we had with basically no schedule, where they could, especially the younger learners, where they could self-pace and they could work around their own family schedules, because a lot of families were working from home. But you'll also find on the next slide, and I'll just preempt it, just don't go there yet, go back, Mike. Yeah, but you'll find on the other slide, you have as many people that also want a schedule. So I share that with you. It's one of the challenges of trying to have remote learning that meets everybody's needs. Then also you'll see what went well: Google Meets, Zoom, those classes that were using more of that down there on the bottom in yellow. They really appreciated that. And again, special education was using it very early, within the first and second week, and it grew throughout the semester. It wasn't a requirement until the very end, where we wanted teachers doing 60 minutes at least during the week. But those families who had it and had more of it seemed like it worked well for them, because they had a lot of personal connection. The next slide is really what could we do? What could we do better? What could we enhance? And one of the things that came up, which I just referenced, was schedule. There are families who didn't like the flexibility because their high schooler was waking up at 10 or 11 o'clock and doing their work at 9 and 10 in the evening. There are a lot of families that want more live instruction. And if you go through the comments, you'll see we'd like more Zoom, we want more Google Meets, we want more live instruction. And then the other thing that comes up is this was very, very, very difficult for parents. Just managing the process in general was difficult. I'm going to stop right there. Are there any questions about the survey? Karen?
I just wanted to see, I assume, I know the board's meeting Monday night, I assume we'll be able to, a document with all of the results will be shared.
Yeah, I'm trying to actually figure out what all I'm going to share on Monday, because we do have the other two surveys. We have this survey and the planning document. So I'm working on that right now, and what that's going to be. But these slides are straight from the survey. I didn't actually create these. They're pulled out of the survey software.
Okay.
That makes sense. Even the word clouds come straight out of the survey software. Any other questions about distance learning on that piece? Okay. So in 2021, what are some of the things that we are doing? We will have more live teaching, and that's something we're committed to. And we're hoping to also have, with our Google Meets platform, we'll have an enhanced platform as well through Google, more succinct school schedule. We are going in that direction. If a family really needs flexibility, that's easier to do. And we do have families, again, that love the flexibility. So if we are in the middle of a COVID spike and it gets as challenging as it was last March and April, it's easier for a parent to reach out and say, I can't really be on it, or my son or daughter can't be on at 9 or 10 because they're having to look after their siblings and help them because, someone in the family is sick, or our work schedules because they're critical workers for COVID. And we can adjust and modify for those families and have a schedule that is set for the other families. it's a little bit easier to do that than it is to be flexible and then try to have a set schedule for a few students. More succinct school schedule. We're also looking at better sound quality for instruction. You know, teachers are not equipped with things like microphones, and when you use a Chromebook, there are very few people that use a Chromebook in their work environment. It's unusual because it's not a robust machine, and a large population of our teachers are operating off of Chromebooks that don't have great sound. The camera functionality is okay. Our elementary teachers were operating simply off of iPads. They didn't even have laptops. Some of them that were more equipped were able to use some of their home devices. And then we had some teachers, when we opened up the building for them to come in and get some equipment, we gave them permission to be able to take their desktop home, just simply because they couldn't function off of the iPad to do what they needed for their children. So we're looking at all of those instructional tools right now as well. And just teacher access to tools. One of the things we're doing with Google is we have been on the basic Google version, and we are enhancing our Google version to our Google Enterprise, which is going to give us more features. And Google is rolling out more new features between now and we hope by September. They say early in the year. And so we'll have access to all of those features, that some of those features that were, for instance, in Zoom that weren't in Google early on, like raise the hand feature, will be in Google. So we're waiting on those to come out, but we are going to enhance our platform for Google. And I might just pause and ask Ann or Mark, since you're instruction, do you have anything to add about summer school into something that you're doing that's different that I haven't mentioned?
We are having the teachers make sure that they are working in small groups with students, which is different from what we did before. And during that time, the students are doing other activities.
Oh, sorry, Karen has her hand up. Can you hear Ann?
No, that's what I was saying. I hear her in the background, but I can't really hear. I don't know if anybody else can. But.
Okay, she's coming closer. When we're too close, that we get feedback.
So what we're doing is we're making sure that the teachers have the opportunity and the students have the opportunity to work in small groups with the teachers. While they're working in small groups, the students are doing other activities with paper and pencil, or they're on an app. And then the teachers have a time that they check in with all their students at the beginning of the class and then at the end of the class. So far, the feedback that I've gotten from the students and the teachers, because I write to them in their Google Classrooms, and I've also gone into the Google Classrooms, it's very exciting. We had some glitches Monday and Tuesday because we couldn't get some of the links. But by yesterday, things seem to be really much smoother. So we're very excited that this is the way to go so far. So we'll have more information at the end of the 5 weeks.
Thanks, Ann. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to add at all?
No, not in relation to summer school, but I did want to underscore how excited we are to bring Link It online to share that information, number one, with the board and also with the staff. We feel that the Link It tool, just in brief, really will be advantageous for teachers to identify on a granular level what instructional pathways they'll need to take with individual students in order to accelerate learning, identify areas that may be in need of being retaught. So we're really excited to launch that in the fall and provide professional development for the teachers, and then ultimately to communicate with families how we are using that actively and consistently throughout the school year.
Thank you. That's a great point. And I think the thing about Link It that is great is we've never had a tool like it, and it's easy to use. It's very user friendly, and it's something that teachers can really utilize as a tool, not just an administrative tool to say, here's how your students are performing. And again, we'll be sure and post that video on with this information on the page, because the video that we did for the board was a good overview of what the tool is. Any other questions on the survey, or just kind of some of the work that we're doing in preparation for the fall?
Tony, it's Mary.
Mary, yes?
We did have a small subset of students that needed some additional paper backup for some of the lessons that were going on, and the parents didn't have the printer capacity to make copies. So if we're going again into remote in the fall, if there was some way of identifying those students who need hard copies of things in order to participate better in the distance learning, rather than running them off on some computer up here and trying to deliver them, I think it would be helpful.
Oh, Anne has just reminded us, Mary, can you please share what's happening for related services at Cost Cobb right now?
The face-to-face?
Yes.
We have about 40-ish students who are participating in face-to-face, either speech, counseling, or both. It's all being done individually. Parents indicated that they wanted to do that. We have a nurse at the back door who checks students in. We do temperature checks and the survey questions. Teachers meet them wearing masks and gloves, escort the student in their mask to the classroom. They either work from 6 feet away, or we have plexiglass sneeze guards on the desks that we can get closer to the students and do work. We have plastic masks and face guards so that students and teachers can see each other's mouths because they're getting speech therapy. And then they exit out the front door. The teacher comes back, wipes down the materials, stores each kid's materials separately, wipes down anything the child has touched, puts on new masks, new gloves, and off they go to get student number 2. So far, the feedback we've gotten has been pretty positive. Parents like the fact that their children have face-to-face contact with a provider. We have not really had anybody drop out so far. Teachers have been satisfied with the level of PPEs that they had. We had the nurse work with them on training. So knock on wood, right now it seems to be going pretty well.
Great, thank you. And I know we were in discussion yesterday in a planning meeting we were having with staff, and just even the plexiglass alone is something we're learning more about. And some of the plexi desk dividers that we purchased for summer, we find are a little bit flimsy. They're not going to work, for instance, in our main offices. And so we know that we have had to get a contractor to work with us that's going to, work on that plexi for like those office areas where you have more people coming in and out. So it's a great learning opportunity for us, having some face-to-face, and it's going to help inform what we do in the fall. So we're thrilled that that's happening and getting that feedback. We're going to switch over to the planning document now. Just let you kind of know where we are. And again, this is a work in progress, and yep, go ahead, Mike. And so keep going. And I know we have to scroll on here. I apologize for that because you don't click through this document. Keep going. Just stop right there. So on this first page, one of the changes that we've made in this working draft is it used to say phase 1, and it didn't use the word low transmission risk. That terminology comes straight from the state document, and so we updated that simply because it is a little confusing with phase 1, 2, and 3. Low transmission is phase 1. When the governor speaks, he talks about phase 3 as opening up the economy and being really low transmission. So it's almost the reverse of how we're talking about it in school. So when we talk about phase 1, that's a good thing. When we talk about phase 3 for critical transmission, that's really when you're on full remote learning. So I just want to point that out, but that's why the word transmission did not appear on there before. Go ahead and go to the next page, please, Mike. We're also going through and looking at what are the guidelines and expectations by the state of Connecticut. We are very focused on guidelines, on expectations, because the requirements are things we must do. So we must make sure that those are in our document. Then we're looking at the guidelines and what really works for Greenwich, what doesn't work for Greenwich. And right now you'll notice there's a new section called expectation for teachers and staff. And they're very basic, but again, it's just those reminders that we're going to need. We want them to stay home if they're feeling sick. They are going to have to do those daily monitoring of their health. Is their temperature, below 100 degrees? Our families will be asked to do that as well. You'll see in a minute. They have to wear a mask at all times unless they're on what we're going to call a mask break. We're going to build those into our schedule. If they are outside, like on a recess, for instance, for first graders, with their cohort of 50 or 100 children and their social distancing and following the regulations, they are allowed to take their mask off and get some fresh air. So we want to build those in, and we also want to build them in for staff. Maintain social distancing, washing their hands often, using the hand sanitizer, do not congregate with colleagues in groups. I had a wonderful email from a high school teacher earlier this week, just with some of the concerns that he has about returning, and just talking about how their staff rooms are often very crowded, where they eat lunch is very crowded. So for each building, we're going to have to really think about, you can still have a team meeting, but it needs to be in a big space around a big table, and people need to have masks on. And we're going to have to rethink how we use the space in our buildings to help our teachers. And then stay home and quarantine for 14 days if a member of your family has COVID. And there will be a stronger checklist that will be added in here. You'll see by the time we get to next week. It's actually, the CDC has done a tremendous amount of work in providing a lot of documents. It's just sorting through which ones really work for Greenwich and which ones we're not interested in utilizing. So go ahead and go to the next page. We also have expectations for students, and you'll notice a lot of the same things. They have to, wear their masks, maintain social distancing. We also have, if possible, stay within a small cohort of people while at school. And we're really trying to do that. Most difficult at high school, easier at elementary and middle school. And be responsible before and after school. We've had a lot of discussion that it's going to be a little challenging for some of our children because they're literally in summer camps right now where there is no social distancing, no mask, anything that's happening. When I say summer camps, most of it that's being reported because we see them in the parks and on our fields, our athletics type teams, and where they're not adhering to any of it. So it may be a change for some of our children. Also entering the building with social distancing, and that is something that we're really going to have to look at again for each building with multiple points of entry, and move down the hallways following all directions. Again, we'll have the floors laid out for them. Go ahead and go to the next page, Mike. And again, the only change on this page is really that low transmission. It's the verbiage that we're using. Keep going down the bottom. So when you look at transportation, go ahead a little bit more, thanks. So again, we've talked a lot about transportation, and that's just looking at where we are as far as how the kids can be on the bus. And then down below that, you'll see there are protocols. And these are some of the protocols that are getting a lot of discussion about wearing the mask on the bus. So we will provide those masks, obviously, for those students who forget to bring them. Students will board the bus with the first students on the bus, have to go to the back seat, and then fill in the seats from back to front. That's a requirement, and that's a change, because usually most drivers will put your youngest learners at the front of the bus. So if we happen to pick up a kindergartner and a first grader, they will be at the back of the bus. And the fifth grader, if they're being picked up last, will be at the front of the bus. And again, when you see those page numbers, it's required that that's what we do. Students should sit with their siblings or household members. And this is different. Sometimes we'll have a first grader and a fourth grader, and they want to split up and sit with their friends. But for cohorting, this is important that siblings actually sit together on the bus, and we'll need help from families to encourage those siblings to do that. And if students are unaccompanied at the bus stop, they should not be, they should not be left alone. If they refuse to wear a mask, and we've had a lot of discussion about this, the driver is going to remind the student. Go ahead and go down a little bit, Mike. The driver is going to remind the student, and if they refuse to comply, the bus driver must continue the route. And when they get to the school, that final destination, they will report, to the principal so that the administration may follow up, have a conversation with the families. Lack of compliance is a disciplinary issue in order to maintain health and safety. And again, this is a requirement from the state, and I think it's real important for people to understand. Bus access may be temporarily discontinued for the student if the principal deems that it's necessary. Now, along with that, we know we're going to have some medical issues, and that's not what we're talking about. This is really just talking about a student who says, I'm not going to wear this. I don't want to do it. But we can't not pick up a student and just leave them stranded at the bus stop either. So student safety is important. If the driver notifies the principal of noncompliance, at that point, the nurse is actually going to meet the bus and just make sure when each student gets off the bus, they're doing an extra temperature check on the bus. We've also had the discussion about if a child becomes ill and actually throws up on the bus. That does happen. So what do we do? And again, that's getting the nurse right out to the bus so that when the kids are exiting, they're taking their temperature, just helping the students feel more comfortable that it's okay. Usually kids want to run off the bus quickly when that happens. But again, we're just making sure all of our protocols are tight. Any questions on so far, anything that I've shared for some of this new information?
Oh,
Right.
I'll let Dr. Noble go first. She probably has a similar question.
Please call me Katie. Nobody calls me Dr. Noble, unless you don't know me. So you all know me. And but I just wanted to make sure I understood this. If a driver notifies the principal of non-compliance, you mean that on that same day that child didn't comply with wearing the mask on the bus?
Yes, yeah, they'll radio in and say that they need the principal, because they need to be able to call home and have a conversation with the family that it is a requirement for us to require masks.
But what I'm questioning is why the nurse would be called to take the temperature of each child on that same day that non-compliance took place. Maybe I'm not understanding that.
Yeah, it's really just an extra layer of safety and security, because if the child's refusing to wear a mask, we don't know why. It's just making sure, again, that the kids that are getting off the bus, if they're not wearing a mask, it's highly likely that child also didn't have a temperature check at home. If they're a non-compliant family that's frustrated by some of these requirements. And so it's an extra layer of safety for our children. And as you know, in the summer school guidance,
even if the child, even if, I would say the only child maybe to take the temperature of is the one that was non-compliant. I don't know, it would be very hard to have anything packed so quickly that somebody would suddenly spike a temperature because they were on the same bus with the child that didn't comply with the mask on that same day. All I'm thinking about is the nurse and how many different directions the nurse is going to be pulled each day. And I would just want to make sure that we're doing things that that are purposeful.
Well, and part of it is just, it's that extra layer of, it's just an extra layer of safety and security. You make a good point, and we can certainly discuss it, discuss it further. It's, I hope that we don't have a lot of that, and we shouldn't after the first, I would say the first couple of days or week, because the student's not going to be able to ride the bus if they're just flat out non-compliant. And if a family is not going to comply with the requirements because we are legally required, this is not my requirement or, the senior leadership's requirement to, to wear the mask. It's from the state. And basically from the legal opinion and from liability for the district is we have to treat this safety and security compliance like we would any other safety and security compliance, from bringing knives to school and everything else, because they feel like it's that important. So I'm hoping that if families are in that circumstance, that they'll choose the remote learning where they don't have to comply with anything, or they'll really kind of rethink and drive their child to school, so at least they don't have to wear the mask getting there. But certainly we can review the temperature piece. It was an extra layer of safety.
Yeah, just that one line.
Sure.
Or the 2 lines there.
So let's move down to food service and see. I'm trying to remember what we have. We have a section here that's new as well. Again, this is determining, it's really that there's not a lot of change in that low and moderate area. That's really determined by the building where children are going to be able to eat lunch, how big the cafeteria is, and those sorts of things. Behind that, you'll see the food service protocols. And again, this is some newest material. That's why it's in blue. And there's a lot of protocols that we have to do just for our food service staff. Looking at the written policies and procedures, we had a long discussion just on how the students punch their numbers in. How can we make sure that the way that we, attribute who's buying lunch and who's not. That was an issue for us when we first went to a higher degree of safety last March. Was, children are having to touch the pad with their fingers. So we're trying to problem solve all of those sort of food service protocols and making sure that we're following all of the guidelines that we need to. So again, this is really more for staff checklists and protocols. Karen?
I was going to ask a question back to transportation, and then it sort of, only the fact that, I know that the state wasn't requiring us to take temperatures. So I was hoping to see if you were going to address, like, if we are going to be doing that on a semi-regular basis, or only if it's based on non-compliance of wearing a mask. Only in the fact that, again, I think it might be very beneficial here to ensure that parents understand that we are guided by policy and procedure and obviously state law and requirements and mandates, to be able to share. We can, share some of the school policies. It's, obviously they're all listed online, but it's not always easy to navigate if you don't know what you're looking for in there.
Yeah, we are not requiring, we're not doing the temperature checks at school, but we will have the home checklist that parents are expected to go through every morning with their own children. And we're going to need a lot of help from families. And part of the decision making there is that we've been advised, don't put anything in this document that's not a requirement that you're concerned you can't do. And taking temperatures, as you know, is what was one of those things we were very concerned about, just the volume of children, not having the staff, unless we were going to take 2 hours to have children slowly come into school, slowly, you know, social distancing, trying to do that with 500 children. And we can't put that requirement off on, for instance, teachers and say, we want you to be the person who's going to take the temperatures at all the doors. There's just a lot of complexity to that. So we were glad that requirement has gone away, and we believe that our families will work with us. But we will take the temperature if there's any concern whatsoever, and the nurse will do that for us. Is that?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that, you know, when we share communication with families, I think it might be beneficial because we do have already policies and procedures that cover keeping your child home if they're unwell or they have a temperature. It might also just be helpful when we communicate out to parents to share that district policy.
Gotcha.
As it outlines things. It's not a new policy. It's been there for a while. It might need to be slightly updated, but I'll take a look.
You're right. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're food service. Those are the protocols. I don't think we need to talk about those much more. Our outside, again, is limiting the cohort use and stagger our outside times. Hand washing before and after, or sanitizing, depending on, you know, whether the classroom has a sink, doesn't have a sink. There are lots of issues like that, how they'll manage that. The designated points of entry, this will be different, a little bit different for us than it has. Sorry, Mike, I'm just still on that one. It'll be a little bit different than it has been in the past, simply because when they arrive in the morning, we're going to have some unique entrances that we haven't had in the past. So in the past, we've tried to limit to you want 1 or 2 points of entry. From a school safety standpoint, from a COVID standpoint, they're telling us the opposite. So we are working with our safety, security, and working obviously discussions with the police, who also help us with safety and security to make sure that we have the best plan. They will have designated doors for points of entry, and there are specifics that we must adhere to, even in how they exit and enter those doors during recess, in limiting the touch aspect. And the mask must be worn at all times when they're inside the school, and recess and playground areas may be mask-free zones of social distancing, and cohort groupings are reinforced. We also are planning for the safe mask storage, which will need to be provided for students as they exit the building into the playground, and then where they get those masks to put them back on. And I'm not going to say we have solved all of the world's issues, because we have not. We had lots of debates about, do you have a hanging, you know, is it shoe pockets? And then we decided, nope, that's not the best thing. There's too much touch. They might put it in the wrong pocket. We're having discussions, should it be just a mask box, like you have, you know, a pencil box or something of that nature that you line up right outside so they know where their pencil box with their mask in it is. But we will have that ready to go as we work with each principal on what's going to work best for each building.
Tony, I just have, excuse me, it's Mary Keller. I just wanted to add, I just found out today, and someone else can correct me if they have better information, but you can't store a mask in a plastic container. It needs to be a cloth. You couldn't put it like in a Ziploc bag or something. And I reached out to Dan to see if anybody knew, if anybody had any data on that, but I'll follow up on it.
Yeah, if you can tell us the magic box, we will buy it. We may have to all go buy a pair of shoes so we can use shoe boxes. I don't know, but we welcome that input, Mary, because we're trying to solve that. And I think the mask breaks when kids are outside to have some fresh air are going to be really important, just to feel like you can, you know, have that little bit of fresh air. Go ahead, Mike, to the next one. Facilities and security. We have a lot going on in facilities and security. Again, a lot of this we've talked about, but there are new items that are in here. The floor guidance mapping, we're planning to start that next week, you know, building by building. The main offices, our nurse's office, our GHS house offices, And if we have essential related face-to-face service providers, for instance, if children are going to go face-to-face speech within a building, those will be equipped with plexi divider. And again, we're working with a contractor for those because we simply don't have the staff to even do that in all of our buildings. And so we're working on that right now. The one that's in yellow is a discussion point. This was in one of the guiding documents, either from the CDC or the early state guidance. And I'm trying to hunt where it came from, but we have already had a union question that they want their members to be able to access a water fountain. So given that that's been raised, we are trying to look at what that means for the water fountains, because there are concerns about leaving the water fountains open. We want kids to be using water bottles. Yes, we can disinfect them often, but it's just a high touch area for children, especially for young children. But that's why it's in yellow. That one is a big discussion point right now. We're doing some more research. We talked about, sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Is that including the water bottle filling stations that we have set up at some of the schools that they're touchless? You know, the students put their reusable water bottle that can be filled. Are those going to be closed as well, or? No,
the intent was not to close those. These are really the ones that you're using your mouth. And but again, we're trying to really get further guidance, because when it was brought to our attention that, well, you really can't do that because it's OSHA guidance. You have to have, you know, the cool water available for the workers. So I was going back, because this is where you have to really look at guidance from one agency versus guidance from another, and which one trumps which. Ultimately, security and safety are at the top of the list if we have conflicting rules or regulations. So that I'm just having to study this one a little bit more to figure out what we're going to do with that. For the tissue grabs, we've talked about all of that. We've talked about paper towel dispensers, that you pull the paper towel, the next one pops out, so you're not having to touch the dispenser. The hand sanitizer in every classroom. We'll make sure that that's available for staff, staff will control that obviously, but available for students as well. The wipes will also be available in every classroom. The hand sanitizing throughout the day, making sure that we have the hand sanitizer at the key points of entry. So those doors that we're using for exits and entries, they will be mounted on the wall. They're not on the poles anymore, and they're working on that right now. We also have signage in all of our restrooms, just reminding, you know, students that they need to wash their hands. Same signage, every restroom, and that's the CDC poster, and you'll see it in just a minute. Utilizing the safe touch methods for vending machines, lunch numbers, and again, we're studying this right now. We still have more work to do. What is the best method for vending machines? Because we have a lot of vending machines, and is it really just having the hand sanitizer close by, so that people are sanitizing before and, you know, after they touch the vending machine. Minimizing the drop-off zones for lost, forgotten, or found items to outside the physical building. And this will be a change for some of our parents. We're gonna have to really ask for help. We don't want visitors and guests inside the building. It's essential guests or visitors only. And again, that comes from the guiding document in order just to, you know, minimize people coming in the building. And we do get a lot of kind of drop-off stuff, but that will be outside zones. And then if we have any school stores, that they'll require glove and mask for the seller. So it doesn't mean your kids can't have some normalcy in their school store, but again, just making sure that from a facility standpoint, we're keeping that area safe, and that we also have the social distancing lines on the floor. Our buildings will get disinfected every evening. Again, we've talked about the signage in the restrooms. Okay, we'll go to the next one, keep going. So this is just a CDC poster, again, that reminds children and the young people that, you know, how to wash their hands, making sure that they do wash for that full 20 seconds. And what you'll see behind this is we do have it in different languages also. This document doesn't have it. The most current one has it in Spanish. So it's right behind this one. Keep going, Mike, thanks. For our classroom spaces, really setting up to maximize the social distancing. And then we talked about this at our last meeting. It's making sure that we try to achieve 6 feet when it's feasible, but they have said 3 feet because we are wearing masks. 3 feet is okay. And that if desks are available, as you know, a lot of our classrooms don't have desks anymore, making sure they're facing the same direction. So it's a little bit different structure. And then we are also looking at the 6-foot teacher zone, kind of the floor mapping for the safe teacher zone. And this is really if a teacher's at the front of the room, because remember all the kids are facing front If the teacher's at the front of the room and wants to have a class discussion or wants to do a demonstration or something for the students, just making sure they know where that 6 foot area is so that if they stay within that area, they know they're 6 feet away from any of their students, just to help the teachers, again, feel a little bit more comfortable in their teacher workspace. And then a plexiglass or clear blocker for tabletop surfaces as needed. Go ahead and go down to the, so on the building use, where we are right now on building use, the inside spaces will not be rented if we're in phase 1 or 2. We were talking about this yesterday, and that will probably be reworded a little bit. The discussion that we're having is that if we don't do any rentals at all, that means all of your basketball, youth programs that use the gyms, all those kind of programs, the PAC center can't be used. And that's really not our intent to say to the community, we don't want you to be able to use any of the facilities. The challenge for us is we can't get those spaces clean and ready for our students the next day. So what we're looking at right now, and Sean O'Keefe was working on it yesterday, is how we can actually charge an additional rental fee that is the COVID fee. It's a COVID impact fee, so that if you're going to rent the gym, you're paying the overtime for us to bring in the custodian because it needs an additional person to actually disinfect that space in the evening. So, and the challenge with that is that the revenue from the building rentals actually goes to the town of Greenwich. It does not go into our operating budget. And so we did find out yesterday that we would be able to request the transfer of a COVID impact fee to come to the operating budget so we can pay the overtime workers. So we're working on that. Again, we know the PAC, and it wouldn't be any other spaces in the building, but we are really looking at like the PAC center and the gym spaces. Karen?
I know I had asked this before, but what about some of I know our facilities are used for standardized testing on weekends for things like, SATs, ACTs, and so forth. I know that that's not necessarily run through us, but I know those dates are set and students have already signed up for a lot of those and for subject tests and whatnot. So I just wanted to see if what the protocol will be for that. I assume we'll still be able to allow the use for that.
Yeah, if it's something that is for instructional use, and that's part of the notes that I had from yesterday when we reword this section, if it's something that's critical for instruction, SAT, ACT would be critical for our students. We would have to make sure that if the space is rented, again, they would have a COVID impact if it's a renter. But when it's school critical, a lot of times they're not paying the rental fee like that. So we would have to pay for the additional disinfecting that would be required for the school. And it was, and I think I mentioned it back in March when we first went out, we did go through over 500 hours of overtime just in a matter of just over 2 weeks. So it's a huge impact on just trying to get buildings disinfected each evening. So for the visitors to the buildings, again, this is limits volunteers and visitors to essential, and this comes straight from the state guidance as well. Fire drills, lockdown drills, these are things we're still working on. We've had to reach out to the state fire marshal, not even just local fire marshal, because if you conduct a fire drill, normally you pull the fire alarm and you want to exit your building within 2 minutes with 500 children or ever how many children are in the building, which means you're certainly not social distancing. You're very close exiting kids very, very quickly. So we're going to have to conduct those differently, but we have to still make sure that we're compliant. And so we're looking at things like perhaps we do some of this room by room instead of as a whole school. But again, we have to work with the fire marshal, and it's everybody working together. Same way with lockdown drills. We can't do lockdown drills as we normally do them because children understand where those safe spaces are in the room, and they all crouch down together, literally together with inches apart. And so we're looking at right now, we want children to understand how to stay safe and still do those drills, but just doing it one classroom at a time, and more discussion about what it would look like. And maybe they crouch under their desk, but knowing that the teacher would be able, if a true emergency happened, the students would know we probably would be in this corner of the room. But we're having to look at even our drills and how those are all conducted. Again, arrival and dismissal are going to be different at every building. Most buildings are coming in that front door of the building. This fall, we're going to have children coming in multiple doors and spreading those out to minimize movement around the building, and also to be able to control that social distancing when kids are coming in. Communications, there's not a lot of updates here other than, again, those tutorials for families and staff. And some of you, after the last meeting, sent some videos, and we've started a repository of different videos that, you know, from CDC, their hospitals have made them around the country. There's a whole lot of them, and just deciding which ones we need to actually produce and where we actually have some really great high quality videos that are available that we can use, that are short, succinct, and easy for students and families and teachers to understand. But again, these are required tutorials that we have to make available. Also just working with resources to make sure substitutes also get that information. The next page, what you're seeing is the daily self-check. This is the self-check that we have right now. And this is what a parent would get. It goes home so that they know that they need to be looking for these, you know, these questions every day, taking their temperature of their child. We will take the signature off of the bottom, and it's not off of this one yet. And that was a discussion late yesterday, and that is because they don't submit them to us. It is a self-check. It's for the family to make sure that they're just being very mindful every day in the self-checks. And then there are things that we will be adding to this document again to manage COVID-19 symptoms at home, and you know what to look for. And all of these posters, I'm going to call them posters, have been produced by the CDC. So we don't really need to go out and reproduce a lot of this information. They have done a tremendous job really in the last 2 months of producing materials, videos, all sorts of things that we can use specifically for schools. And I prefer to use their documents than Greenwich Public Schools creating our own, simply because I think there's a lot of trust in the CDC. Good, Katie likes that. Behind that is the teaching and learning, and I know it's we're on to almost 11 o'clock. For the teaching and learning aspect, we started out today talking about distance learning and what that's going to look like, what the required professional development is for staff. And I do want to mention on the Board of Education meeting on Monday night, we're working right now on a calendar adjustment that will be proposed to the board. And what it does is it takes 2 of the days from the school year that were teacher days or professional days, moving those to the beginning of the year, which means the start of school would get pushed back by 2 days in September. And that's because we need additional time for teacher training. We always have a lot. It's hard to get everything in on a good year. And this year, having all of these other required professional development and also understanding the movement around the building. You know, when teachers come in their building the first time, what stairway does a particular room use? Because it may be a different stairway than they've used previously in the past, and just how we utilize the building. Behind that, go ahead and keep going, Mike. And these are all, again, things about professional development. Some of the trainings, you'll see Link It was on there. We have to make sure everyone gets trained in Link It. Go down to the school schedules, because I know this is probably the hot topic, really. Just letting you know where we are as of today. So in K-5, we're feeling very confident about full reentry for K-5, maximizing social distancing, cohorting, some sort of staggered arrival. This is going to be a little bit different at each building. And again, it may not have to be as staggered depending on the building and how many points of entry they have available. Do they have a front drop off, a back drop off? But we are going to, you know, ask families, which I said early on, to try to minimize. Please don't take the bus unless you absolutely need the transportation, simply because we want to keep numbers low on the buses. And to reduce staff grouping sizes, we're utilizing our advanced learner program. And this is something that already happens naturally. It's already intact. And what it does is it reduces the number of students in our regular education classrooms. So when our ALP students come out of a classroom, and that's your advanced learner program, if you have, let's say you have 22 students in the classroom and you have 4 that are going to ALP for math, reading, and this year the pull-out aspect of science is coming back, the numbers in the classroom actually drop naturally. And it's really looking at how many ALP students you have in a classroom and how are they distributed between the 3 teachers, so that you don't have 7 ALP students leaving one classroom and the classroom drops down to 13 kids, and then the other classroom they're sitting at 18 or 19 because they didn't have any ALP students. So we're doing a lot of work on this schedule, and I know Mark D'Amico has jumped right in on this project, and you know, having been an elementary principal with us for 15 years, really understands how this program works. So that's, having that wealth of knowledge is very, very helpful. But we will have more on this. But again, we're feeling confident about where we are. When you look at K1 class sizes, we're working really hard to keep those under 20 and with social distancing. And keep in mind, kindergarten and first grade classrooms tend to be much larger, especially in kindergarten. So you can spread students out a little bit easier. And some of the items we had in our classrooms that were really high touch are going to have to come out. So they're probably even going to feel a little bit more spacious than they normally would, just because we're going to have to look at what equipment we have in all those spaces. For middle school, again, we're feeling very confident with middle school about full reentry for 6 through 8. Cohort sizes are between that 50 and 100. And when you think about middle school having a teaming model, and whether or not all 100 will be able to rotate more, or that team of 100 is going to have to look like 50 are engaging and 50 are engaging from a student perspective, not the teacher. The teachers would rotate across. And so the teaming model works really well in middle school. And what it's going to depend on, if a team, if you have class sizes, for instance, that are 24 and it's too large for the space sizes that you have, then they have to pull off and add another section to that. So they are looking at modifying their schedules in order to create that cohort movement. So the schedule will be different than what we've had in the past. We're looking at really utilizing those electives differently than we have in the past, because you can't have children all over the building, but we also want them to still have some electives. So the elective team teachers, we're looking at, they join the actual middle school core team. When I say core team, that's like, you know, history and English, science, and they join that core team and they stay with them for a period of 6 or 9 weeks. So the teachers are very consistent. The students all stay consistent, and that allows you to help spread kids out to more classrooms and more environments. So in middle school, again, and this is good, because early on we were concerned that we were not going to be able to bring middle school back and feel comfortable, but we have the space. We think there's a good strategy, and the 3 middle school principals, I give them credit. We were on a call with them yesterday. They're all 3 positive. And they're really willing to, you know, tackle this work, and they want their children, students back in school as well. But we want to do it safely for everybody, teachers and students. So high school is the one that's probably the most challenging. High school, we're looking at a recommendation of a hybrid schedule, and that's no more than approximately, I say approximately 50% of the students on campus at one time, and face-to-face instruction and set up with the remote learning days. So you would be on campus for a day and perhaps off campus the next day. We will have a recommendation for the board. We're still having a lot of conversation right now. It's a challenging, complex problem, because high school is, you know, 2,900 students, but they would be on site 2 to 3 days each week. Now, this is a big debate point when you look at hybrid schedules. Early on at the height of COVID, CDC came out and made a statement about keeping the same cohort of kids there for 4 days and then off for 10. And then the next cohort of kids are coming in for 4 days. The challenge with that is, again, listening to our community, and we think what our families have said to us, and also based on survey information, is there are a lot of concerns about having high school students home by themselves for an entire week. We're going to have parents that go to work. High schoolers are still young people. They're 15, 16, don't always make the best decisions when left alone, and especially for an entire week. It also causes a lot of challenges with their just even personal scheduling of their academic time. So we are looking at 2 to 3 days each week. And more than likely what that looks like for a hybrid is, if you're student A, you're on the A schedule, 1 week you're 2 days, the next week you're 3. If you're a B schedule, you would have the opposite. So, and that's because you have 5 days in a week. So A, B, A, B, A, and then the next week, A, B, A, B, B, if that makes sense. So the Friday is the alternating piece. Social distancing, we feel like we can maintain in and around the building by lessening the building to half. And our class sizes will be very small with the mask on. We feel like it's going to be a very safe environment for our teachers to get them where they're comfortable, and also our students. So that's where we are right now on the scheduling. And I know we're about 1 minute over, but I'm sure you have questions on this section. So questions? Karen?
Obviously, I know we're going to get a little bit more detail and get a little more granular with how we're going to be revising the high school schedule, because I know we have the 8-day rotational block And obviously students at every grade level are mixed within classes. You know, I know we have, SEAC has not released its updated guidelines yet for after school sports, but I definitely want to see how we're going to handle things for students with extracurricular participation in club or team. If they're not there every day, obviously you know, the cost to transport kids back and forth to school, if they're not there on that day, and or that affects cohorting. So I'm not sure how we handle that. I just wanted to bring that forward. And also first, you know, there'll be certainly students that, you know, I don't know if there'll be any situations where we would allow students to be there full time on the A-B schedule. For instance, if they have different learning needs that need to be addressed in person. So I just hope we're going to look into that, as well as students in some of the AP classes, or the college level classes. They, you know, as to how we can make sure that the students are accessing the curriculum in a timely fashion, because it moves at a very quick pace. I assume we'll be looking into the possibility of streaming for those classes or others. I don't know, but these are just questions I know that have been shared with me, and things that I had a slight concerns about. So I just wanted to make sure that we're addressing that, because obviously some of those things are tied to schedule, some of them are tied to IEP 504, IDA, and things like that, as well as our social and emotional needs for our students and their physical activity. So I just want to make sure that we're cognizant of how that those things can still function, even if that means revising teams that, you know, how they meet and function as well. Or you know, not just even teams, other extracurricular things like music, band, clubs. I know, you know, we have academic clubs as well that have state and national championships, and they meet regularly as well. So.
Yeah, I'll address a little bit of that. And I'll be, you know, the granularity of the schedule may very well come after July 24th. It's a tremendous amount. I think what we're really wanting to signal to the community, we're trying to do it early on. We feel great about bringing K-5 back full on. 6-8, we're feeling really good. High school, we absolutely do not believe it's a safe environment to bring the full high school back. So now we have to move forward about what is that going to look like, because we know we need to have fewer students. The other thing we've had a lot, and you hit on most of the big points, Karen, cohorting. You cannot cohort right now really in the high school. Between their athletic cohort, their club cohorts, their, you know, scheduled cohorts. So we are really focused on having few students, very small classes, making sure, and that's why having the classes, if you have a class of 22, you've got a very small environment, so you can really feel safe as a teacher and a student, and because they're wearing the mask. We know that with that environment, we feel better about it. Some of our electives will not take place as normal. Right now where we are, things like chorus, we can't have chorus as of right now, because when students sing, it projects. So we'll be watching that all the way up until when school starts and see what guidance we get. The other thing, it doesn't mean we can't have a distance. You know, we had some beautiful things that were done via a Zoom, you know, this last spring. So doesn't mean we can't offer it differently, but you wouldn't go to that elective face-to-face. So I just want to clarify. The other thing is looking at some of our perhaps IEP students who have an IEP, and could we do something different on some of those services? We can, except that again, when you take the teacher and you've split the class, you know, for good reasons, you also can't just mix other students back in. But that's part of that scheduling complexity we'll have to look at, and there may be some unique situations. For the AP teachers, the AP classes, whenever you meet 2 to 3 times a week face-to-face, it's going to be critically important that the high school teachers adjust their instruction, because when the students at home, they should be having their course schedule. They're still, you know, they're still working. Now, the issue of streaming is a totally different ballgame. And right now, that's why I say with the complexity of the schedule, there's not a, I'm not going to say, there's not a wonderful way to actually stream right now with equipment that is available that we have. You certainly can take a laptop, you can run it through like we're doing today, Google Meets. But when you look at a very large environment, we're going to make sure they can hear the teacher. So that we will have a microphone system so that the audio will be clear. That's one thing that you lose often in a big, you know, cavernous room. And one of the challenges will be trying to make sure if they have materials, for instance, that they're presenting on their smartboard, they're going to have to send those out to students either after or before, because it's very difficult with the camera to actually see what's happening. You know, and I was pointing out yesterday, when we were having a meeting, if you look here on the Google at what's behind Dr. Noble, what's behind Mark, you really can't tell what's on the wall, yet you're not that far away. So if you start thinking about it from a classroom environment, you're pretty far away. So we're going to make sure the audio is strong, and whether or not we go with the streaming model or that's part of that instructional decision, or the students are at home because the teacher has set them up for what they need to do for at-home learning. That's part of that discussion right now, but we are, again, going to make sure the audio quality is there for a student who wanted to watch from home. We've done the stress testing. We just did that this week, and that was really just, let's stress the whole infrastructure aspect. Can we stream the whole high school if we even wanted to do it? And that was another big question we had, just about the technical aspect. Social emotional, we still have a lot of work to do on exactly how we want to support that. But that's one reason why we really want kids in 2 to 3 days a week, not going 1 week on, 1 week off. And it's trying to balance social emotional, the needs of students, safety and security all together. And, you know, I know we've said this before, some of them have competing kind of interests. For CIAC, which is the athletics component and activities, they give example of football. They start football on August 17th. And we're going to see what CIAC, you know, as they monitor that in August, where will they be by the time school starts? But they're planning for a full return to athletics. But, you know, again, it's a little complex when you look at, like, I think, Karen, you and I had an exchange last night about how the Ivy Leagues had canceled their sports seasons for the fall. So, yeah, I don't think anybody really knows what September is going to look like, but they're planning on a full return to sports.
Yeah, I didn't expect that you would necessarily have any details on any of those things at this point. I just know that these are concerns that have been shared with me, and concerns I've seen. Obviously, I've been keeping my eye on what's going on all around the country and so forth, as we've discussed. But I just wanted to make sure that they were things that we were considering, and that people that have reached out and asked questions know that they are top of mind. So that when we're considering, and obviously I know that parents and our staff need to be understanding and flexible, as things might be changing right up until school starts, or even post that. But, you know, I just know that we want to make sure that everybody, our staff and our students, feel safe and comfortable to return to our schools, because there really is no better alternative to having face-to-face education delivery. So
yeah, we absolutely agree with you. And, you know, even for the high school, I mean, we looked at, could you move, you know, freshmen somewhere else? Could you move, you know, one grade level to have a freshman academy to another site? But even to do that, it's finding a building where you can social distance and do what we need to do for 700 students. You know, the property's not available. And the one private school that's closing this year, we did the on-site visit to see how many students could we fit there. And it was just, it doesn't seem to be the resource that would even help us if we wanted to rent. So we feel like we're really trying to make sure our teachers know that their health and safety is important. Our families know their students, you know, health and safety is important. And we want to make sure, however we return, that people know that we've given this a lot of thought. We want them to feel comfortable in coming back. Any last parting questions, since we're about 10 minutes over today? I knew the schedule would be of interest, so that's probably one of the issues a lot of people have been wanting to hear about.
Well, I'll just add, I have a student that's doing summer school for advancement this summer. And for those who are concerned, I will specifically say, I have personally witnessed, well, not personally, but I've heard from my student, because I'm not watching the classes, but how things have improved every single day. And she's pointedly said it's been a fantastic, amazing experience. And learning from the teacher live that way has really been an exceptional experience. A very positive feedback, at least from one student.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's what we want to hear. So, and we will actually get survey kind of feedback from families. And like Ann said, I know the curriculum team is chiming in and checking on classes and trying to make sure that we know exactly how it's working, and you know, getting feedback from teachers as well. So But thank you very much. And I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon, and we will keep working away on our re-entry plan and try to get everybody in a confident spot that we are going to make sure children and staff are safe and secure and we're able to return. That's our goal. So have a wonderful afternoon.